Hello chaps. The other day I put up a video, I'm going to clear up here, I put up a video, food for thought, which is like my last one, and I indicate I want to change things somewhat, and judging by the comments, a few of you think you're going to get rid of me. Ha ha ha! Not so easy, don't worry, I'm still here, the old buffer's still going to stand up and waffle away. But I've got a myriad of ideas I want to put forward before the old Grim Reaper pays me a call. My initial thoughts are sort of micro budget films at the moment. I mean, that's something I can play around with the old camera and at home, especially if I'm no longer so active to play with boats and so forth. Anyway, that time hasn't quite come yet, but they're my initial thoughts, so you don't get rid of me too easy. Ah. Anyway, while the camera's running, here's a little snippet for you, something to think about. Well, here's a little snippet of information you may find interested. I've got a few moments, so I recalled a memory the other day. I had a subscriber ask me about rocket stoves. Well, as a lad I played around with in camping, cooking stoves, the usual thing, a bean tin with packed sawdust and a broomstick to make a hole. We didn't call them rocket stoves, they were forced draft cookers in them days. Anyway, it recalled a memory, and it's this I'm just going to show. You may find of interest. It was many years ago. I was working on a wooden boat, and we had a lot of offcuts and sawdust and shavings to get rid of. And I was working down at the club sheds, and lots of valuable boats inside, and just old sheds, wooden sheds. And the last thing we want is a fire, so if you lit a fire to get rid of the rubbish, you had to stand around and wait till it went out. You just couldn't take the risk. Some of the guys had incinerators, little dustbins with holes punched in them, but they didn't last long. They soon got beaten up and rusted, and the bottoms fell out when you emptied the ashes. So I decided to make one. I made one out of a 5-foot gas cylinder. I cut the top off a cylinder. There's our cylinder. Not terribly well drawn, I admit. There's the base. Concave bottom. Convex, whatever. As I say, I cut this top off. And it's about 2.5 foot in diameter, I suspect. And this worked very well as an incinerator, and about a foot or 18 inches from the bottom I put in some inch holes all the way around, and at the same time I drilled a 1/4 inch hole in the bottom so that any rainwater would go out through this as it stood out in the open. Anyway, it worked very well. And I used it several times, and I felt safe that the fire was enclosed within this. Anyway, one time I had a real damn good clear up, and I was on my own working on the boat, and I had loads of shavings and sawdust and offcuts and bits of rotten wood. And I filled up, well, I didn't know at the time, but about that level of sawdust, and then I chucked pieces of wood in on top. Then I threw in an old rag which I set fire to, and I went into the boat and proceeded to carry on working. Well, I was working there for about 20 minutes, and I heard what I thought was a motorbike pull up outside, very loud, and sat there with his engine running. What the hell's this? So I stuck my head out the top of the boat, and there was no one there. It was this stove. The bottom was glowing bright red, and the whole thing was acting like a doodlebug, a V1 doodlebug. Flames were shooting out the top, and I think what was happening was this rocket stove principle. Air was being drawn in through these holes at the bottom, sort of quite velocity, and disturbing this layer of sawdust which was in suspension, which exploded and went out through the top. This caused the remainder of this sawdust to come back down and close this bottom, almost like a valve if you like, but this meant that there was an even greater vacuum here, so more draft shot into the holes, and so the whole process went on. Well, this lasted for about a quarter of an hour, 20 minutes. And I was getting increasingly worried as it went from a sort of a cherry red, really bright red, to an almost white heat the whole length of the cylinder. And flames were going way above the top of the buildings, and I was, well, I got scared. But after a little while it sort of died down, and then it just stopped and just burnt normally. And despite my efforts of trying to recreate this situation, it's often thought that it might try, but I've never actually experienced this again. So there's some interesting thoughts there. Anyway, food for thought.